Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we still do have a bit of rain in the west over the next 48 hours or so, and we are going to see some generally cooler conditions, but by the weekend into the start of the following week it is going to be turning much warmer. It is looking likely to now see the warmest conditions of the year so far. Of course, it was inevitable to beat the sort of low 20s that we've seen throughout the spring so far, but it does look like we are going to get towards the mid 20s into next week as we too see a warm or even hot southerly wind. Now, it doesn't look like it's going to last all too long. The long range charts are all agreeing that a southerly or southeasterly flow will arrive next week, but it is a transitional southerly. This isn't a pattern change. We aren't going into a hot and dry spell, but we are going into is something a little bit more blocked. And while that high pressure system is moving from Europe northwards, that's when we see this southerly wind. The runs today are actually in agreement of a northerly wind arriving later on into early May as that high pressure slowly transitions westwards. So yeah, a lot of the runs today start very warm, if not hot, and then slowly transition back towards average, and some even significantly below average come the end of their run. So it could be lots of chopping and changing with those temperatures in the coming weeks. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see at the moment we have got this big batch of heavy rain moving in from the west. At the moment, it's raining across the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, as I'm recording this, around 9 p.m, but all indications from the models is that this is going to fizzle away as it approaches the Irish Sea. It's coming up against that high pressure system that is slowly building in, and it will slowly degrade away. Could be bits and bobs of rain further eastwards and some thicker cloud with that, but generally speaking, most of that heavy rain will not get across the Irish Sea. Now, temperatures this evening aren't particularly warm, but it's not too bad either. Generally, temperatures are getting back towards average after being a little bit below average early this week, and will slowly transition to above average into next week. Now, to have a look at the latest UKV now, you can see that rain heading in from the west at the moment, and it looks really quite heavy in places into Friday morning. But as we said, it's not really going to get across the Irish Sea. Yes, some thicker cloud and some on and off rain could do, but generally speaking into Saturday that rain slowly fizzles away, doesn't turn to much into Saturday afternoon. The only caveat with that is there will be some thicker cloud from that decayed weather front. So although yes, drier for most on Saturday, it is going to be pretty cloudy, which is a bit unfortunate. Into Sunday, though, another area of rain tries to approach from the west and northwest, but again, doesn't make much progress. And by the afternoon, a lot more in the way of sunshine in the south, still a bit cloudy in the north. But this is when those warm temperatures start to arrive already towards 20-degree mark through Sunday. Low 20s into Monday, where we see a lot more in the way of sunshine, a bit more hazy further northwards. And then slowly into Tuesday, look at that, bone dry conditions for most, lots of sunshine and temperatures in and around the mid-20s, 25, 26 degrees, definitely looks like a real possibility. Now, do look at those max temperatures. You can see as we head into Friday, nothing too spectacular, around the mid-teens, so getting back close to average for the time of year for most. Into Saturday, it's again another day where temperatures around those mid-teens, maybe more towards the higher teens, 17, 18 degrees. Now, Sunday starting to get a bit higher, looking at 19 to 21, maybe an isolated 22. Into Monday, slightly warmer once again, looking at more at 21, 22, 23. And finally, into Tuesday, we start to see temperatures rising further, 23, 24, maybe 25, and definitely looking at 26 possibly into Wednesday or Thursday. So staying much warmer into next week. Definitely looks like it's going to be the warmest spell of the year so far. But as I said, don't suspect it will last too long. And we can see that now from the latest GFS. Now we see this warm southeasterly wind starting to arrive over the coming days as we see high pressure building in off the near continent. But it's a transition. Initially southeasterly, but then look where that high pressure goes. By the end of the week into the start of May, it moves further westwards. Now initially, with a legacy of that warm air around, still with that cut-off low to our southwest, could be a few thunderstorms around and will look very warm. But progressively into early May, look at this, the wind direction shifts. Instead of being a southerly or southeasterly, very quickly it shifts to a northerly or northeasterly, turning unsettled once again, and much, much colder there into the first full week of May. Again, it's a little bit over the top with this. It's very cold with a direct northeasterly, but nonetheless, cold wind direction looks like a real possibility there from this latest GFS run. Now, of course, we are looking at May here, so we're almost into the summer months. So you can see there's not that much cold air available to our north, but nonetheless, it's well below average for the time of year and could be very chilly. And you can see it actually spins up this quite severe low by the end of the run with cold air on the western flank, warm air on the eastern flank, and that could be a real rainmaker there for parts of the norths and potentially some thunderstorms as well. So that's something to keep an eye on into early May. So although initially into next week, you can see it's dry, fine, warm, feeling like summer for about 3 or 4 days, it's not going to last too long, and it looks like more unsettled and cooler conditions will return after that. Not guaranteed, but that's the suggestion today from lots of these runs. It's a similar pattern to the GM. The GM cottoned onto this southerly or southeasterly wind pretty early on this week into the weekend, and it was a bit over the top initially, showing potentially 30 degrees. Not likely to see that, but mid-20s definitely, and you see that as that high pressure does build in. Now it holds on for much of next week, so a little bit longer lasting than the GFS, but similar towards day 10. As we head into early May, look at this, northeasterlies or northerly winds get unlocked, and you can see cold air starts to move in. So again, would turn much, much more unsettled, and unfortunately, looks pretty horrible indeed. See all these blues flooding in from Scandinavia, from being very warm early on in the week to potentially very cold. It's a similar story from the ECM, though we have strong agreement from the runs today. High pressure building in, initially looking pretty mild, warm and dry, but progressively towards the end of the week, in line with the GFS really, that northeasterly wind does arrive, and again it's a pretty clear-cut northeasterly wind. Look at that, the -5 isotherm moves in, and we're looking at around 6 to 8 degrees below average, so unfortunately it does look pretty poor indeed. Now, do finish the video, by having a look at the latest ensembles. You can see a big spike in temperatures into next week, and generally for the end of April and start of May. But it does look like the temperatures will probably peak this time next week, around next Wednesday, Thursday, and then pretty stark drop off there around the 4th, 5th of May, back towards average for the foreseeable future. But there is lots of up and down. You see the operational run there, much, much cooler with a lot of the other runs, but not all are going for it. So even though all the operationals produce a northerly or northeasterly wind, there's not complete agreement within the ensemble members. That's hopefully a little bit of a glimmer of hope that it's just a coincidence today that all the operational runs agree with this colder pattern later on into May. Hopefully, though, we don't see something as extreme as some of these operational runs. So hopefully we don't see a full-on northeasterly. Or it could get really quite chilly there, and some big, big contrasts. Precipitation fairly low for the next week, but does start to pick up more into May. But again, that's just uncertainty building in, and potentially that cooler air and more unsettled air coming in from the northeast. Now, to finish by looking at the latest ECMWF ensembles, look at the midnight run. Broadly, very similar, big spike in temperatures into early next week, and then again a drop off and lots of deviations there into early May, but definitely quite a few runs that do go much, much colder. So again, that's one to keep a very close eye on. So big changes coming in the next week or so. Much, much warmer conditions for a time through the second half of this weekend into early next week. So do cherish that and enjoy it. A bit of early summer. And, we are getting towards the summer months. We have to start calling it proper summer soon before potentially a return to something more in tune with earlier in the year. Hopefully that doesn't occur, but definitely a strong agreement from the operational runs and quite a few ensemble members today. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you again for another video soon.